Welcome to the IPL Weekly Review, guys, powered by SSE. So if you haven't checked out the app yet, please go check it out. I've got Monty Panesar with me, Nakul Pande with me. Let's kick things off. And just before I start, actually, just news just came through that Pat Cummins has donated $50,000 to India's COVID relief fund. The situation being really bad there. So I'd like to say, well done, Pat Cummins. Just before we start off, had to be a KKR player. Just putting it out there. But that brings me to KKR. Since I last spoke to you, KKR played 3 games during the week, lost all three, and have gone from sixth to bottom of the table with the worst net run rate available. What has gone wrong for Owen Morgan's team? Do you want to start us off, Monty? Because you said Owen Morgan, best captain in the IPL this year, and he's languishing at the bottom. So what's happened?
Yeah, look, I think he's obviously finding it difficult, with the franchise team that he has at the moment, and probably the batting. I reckon the top three is where he's actually, it's the Indian domestic players which probably are not firing, and I think for every team, if you look at, there is one or two sort of the domestic players performing well, and it's just they're doing well in the bowling, but it's just the batting really, and I don't think Owen Morgan is comfortable going up the order. He rather have the three sort of Indian domestic players to perform and give them a good start. But obviously they sort of get bits and pieces starts. Get 20, 10 or something, not really kick on, and then the inning doesn't really sort of get any momentum.
Yeah, and with KKR's top three last year, they were the slowest scoring in the power play as well. They averaged seven and over in the power play last season. That's also obviously, especially in the last game, we saw it was a big problem for KKR in the 6 overs. They got about 25 runs and lost 1 wicket. So, Nakul, in your opinion, the top three, are they good enough at KKR? And is Shubman Gill batting too slow?
Well, they started the season really well, didn't they? Nitish Rana, in particular, started the season very well. In that opening game, was a big part of that opening win, and they done really well against KKR. Rahul Tripathi was going very well. It does look as though Shubman Gill is sort of batting. It's almost like he can't quite break through that to find that extra gear without looking really uncomfortable. Um, and that happens sometimes when you get these players like Shubman Gill, who's a very almost not orthodox, but a very classical player. He plays shots through the covers, plays lovely shots through the infield, and maybe he isn't entirely suited. But we have seen him, we have seen players like that able to score runs and find a way to perform. I still think with KKR there is enough upside from their players in terms of there is enough left in the tank for them to be able to perform better than they are, and we kind of saw that on Wednesday. I was commentating the spell of the game where Andre Russell and Pat Cummins started taking the game away from Chennai. They had too much to do in the end, but I don't think the start needs to be that much better from KKR for them to start being a force again in the tournament. Particularly as we're moving into, their next game, where KKR based now. They're based in Ahmedabad
Ahmedabad for
now.
4 games and they
Yeah,
start.
Ahmedabad is a quicker pitch. Ahmedabad's a much quicker pitch than the Wankhede pitch has been a little bit weird the last couple of days, but the Ahmedabad is a good track and should suit them in theory. If they want to move around with it, I agree with Monty. Morgan's not comfortable necessarily batting in the top three. He's never really done it. It's not a role that he knows very well. Maybe it's time to go back to Sunil Narayan opening and at least get some sort of start in the power play, because whatever he does, he's going to do it quickly. And at least if you get, 40 runs, 50 runs on the board in the power play, at least you've got something to work with. Because at the moment, they're not really helping themselves.
So then who would you open with? Would you stick Nitish Rana back at three, which is where he started at KKR? Or would you both say maybe Gill comes down the order when he started with KKR? He used to bat at 6 and 7 in his first season. So what do you guys think? Where's the better position for him if Narayan has to open?
I think probably that I quite like the attacking intent of having Gill and Rana opening. And then Shubman Gill maybe at three, which is a little harsh on Rahul Tripathi, who is a good and aggressive player. But I don't think batting down the order is a good move for Shubman Gill, and certainly he's not better in that position than any of Owen Morgan or Dinesh Karthik or Andre Russell or even Pat Cummins if they shorten the batting lineup with an extra bowler. I do think one other change that needs to happen is they've got to get Lockie Ferguson into this 11 somehow.
I think I completely agree with you. I personally feel Lockie Ferguson would be in the 11 if it wasn't for Pat Cummins' batting. Because I think if you just objectively look at Pat Cummins, the bowler, the amount of money KKR have paid for him, I don't think he's done justice to it, especially this season. So I would definitely look at Lockie Ferguson. But the question is then which foreigner do you drop? You can't drop Andre Russell. You can't drop Owen Morgan because he's the captain. And you obviously will not drop Pat Cummins because he brings some batting. So then the only person you can drop is Sunil Narayan, who's not done badly since his comeback. He's bowled well. I think the 2 games he's bowled, the first 2 games at least, he was really good. So what would you do, Monty? Would you drop Owen Morgan and give the captaincy back to Dinesh Karthik?
Well, I think they're going to be going, backwards doing that because, last year in the UAE, halfway through the tournament, I think Brendan McCullum, wanted Owen Morgan to be the captain. It's an interesting one. I remember Nicole saying that, it's either Pat Cummins or Lockie Ferguson playing together. Maybe give Pat Cummins a rest. He's played a few games. He's performed well, and sometimes, resting one of your main players is sort of quite refreshing, really, and give maybe Lockie Ferguson a go. I think ideally the team, they can't really work out what their best 11 is. And this is, I think, the trouble when you have an overseas captain. If he's not performing well with the bat, it puts so much pressure on the team. So, look, as much as, we love Owen Morgan, the captain, and his leadership skills, I think the real problem is Owen Morgan firing. If he can start getting a few runs, I think it would just solve a lot more problems, with the team sort of balance and everything. So we're hoping, he can start firing in Ahmedabad.
Yeah, and now we'll move from the team from the bottom to the team to the top. Chennai Super Kings riding high at the top of the table. I'll just get their net run rate up because it's the highest in the league as well. 5 games, 8 points, and a net run rate of plus 1.6. They're firing on all cylinders, the old boys. What are they doing right this year? Monty, I'll start with you.
Yeah, who is he talking about?
Chennai Super Kings.
Yeah, I think yeah. Look. I think with Chennai Super Kings, they've actually got such a solid all-round sort of combination in their team that some of the players may not perform with the bat, they can do with the ball, and they've got a really experienced middle order. So you look at KKR, their top 3 is relatively inexperienced, young, players who've probably played few seasons in Ranji Trophy. But you look at KKR, they've got Anpati Raidu, Suresh Raina, Robin Atapattu, who's not even featuring at the moment. So I think that balance works really well because having a blend of IPL experienced Indian players as well as the youngsters, that sort of then it's a nice easier sort of grooming of the top order of Gaikwad, who's opening at the top of the order. You can actually be loyal to the younger players because you've got a bit of experience there. Keep playing them, they will start firing. But when you have like the top 3 of Shubnam Gill, Rahul Chakrabarti and Rana, right? I think in between that, they need one experienced Indian domestic player, So if Robin Atupatu isn't actually getting the opportunity, like this is where I think halfway they should able to like loan players out. So like teams will be thinking, actually, Robin Atupatu would fit perfectly. I think he would solve the problems for KKR.
It's interesting you mentioned that because that is actually happening.
Yeah, that is happening. There was a thing last year. It was there last year as well, but no team made a trade halfway through the season. So it'd be interesting. Nakul, do you think KKR should bring in someone in the midway stage?
Well, the team who've mentioned it, that they want to use it as Rajasthan Royals because obviously they've had a lot of overseas players pull out or be injured for whatever reason. So you've had Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer injured, Liam Livingston pulling out because of COVID fatigue, bubble fatigue, and Andrew Ty pulling out from a combination of COVID fatigue and not wanting to get stuck outside Australia. So they have called for this window to be activated, and they, as much as we know, is that they've got in touch with, quote, a southern-based franchise, which basically probably means Hyderabad or Chennai, or Bangalore, I guess, also counts as the south. But they've also had players pull out, so I can't imagine that they'd be trading anyone. Who that would be, I'm not entirely sure. It might be Jason Roy. The two I was thinking of were Jason Roy or Jason Berendorf, maybe. So the rules are, just to kind of set the scene, it has to be players who've only played 2 or fewer games this season. They can't play against their host franchise, so it's similar with loans in football. And they can't move back, obviously. That makes some sense. So maybe I don't know that KKR adding another player is actually going to be of much use to them, because the problem with, or not the problem, but KKR's thing is they've got a lot of very good players. They're just not performing. I think adding another player into that mix who might also not perform just complicates matters further for KKR. So I can certainly see it being used for other franchises, to particularly Rajasthan Royals. But I don't think it'll help KKR very much. It's just a case of, it's exactly the same as I said before just after the auction. It wasn't a case of them getting extra players in. It's getting the most out of the players they've already got. And Monty's absolutely right. That includes Owen Morgan, because if Morgan's firing, suddenly it makes the rest of the lineup much more dangerous.
Yeah, and coming to Chennai, I think, is it now possible to write last season as just a one-off bad season? Because Chennai has been so good, consistently made the playoffs every year. Last year was the first year they didn't make the playoffs.
Viraj, I've got to disagree with you there. I'm sorry, but Chennai are a good team in India. You know, MS Dhoni is a great captain. When the wicket is turning and the pitches are slow and low, he is one of the best T20 captains. But in the UAE, the pitches were much faster. You know, they didn't have high arm bowlers. You know, even at the start of their lineup, they obviously didn't play him. So I think Chennai Super Kings are a brilliant team in India.
The one caveat I'd say to that is they played a lot of games at Mumbai, which has been a quick wicket, and they have won games batting first at Mumbai, and then defending, which is not easy. They actually chose to bat first at the weekend. And what I would say with KKR is the bowling was never a problem. It wasn't a problem last year either. They've got a lot more intent and aggression at the start of their innings now. Ruturaj Gaikwad took a couple of games, but is now batting really fluently. Faf du Plessis batting really well. Suresh Raina, as I think we all said, has made a huge difference to that middle order. Moeen Ali's done really well at the top of the order when he's come in. Sam Curran, when he got promoted up to the top of the order, has done really well. Ambati Raidu's batting with more fluency than he did last year. So it means that there's no slowdown, apart from Dhoni, who continues to be weird. But Dhoni is Dhoni, and you know, he's not facing enough balls to be doing damage. And you know, he will fire at one point this tournament, probably just by sheer. And then you've got, I mean, we have to talk about Jadeja, right? Jadeja was unbelievable yesterday. If that's one of the all-time great T20
We've got an
individual
entire segment dedicated to that innings. Don't worry about that. That was brilliant.
Yeah, so but CSK have solved that issue that they had last year, and it's not just one player doing it. I think they've even maybe evolved from their previous good seasons. It used to be Shane Watson and Suresh Raina doing all the attacking. Now it's most of the top order, and it just makes you much more dangerous. And it allows their bowlers something to bowl at, frankly. You know, Deepak Chahar has been brilliant so far this tournament. Imran Tahir came in and did really well yesterday, and as I say, Moeen Ali's been going really well. So I think that Chennai have solved a lot of the problems they had last year, and they've done it without the advantage of Chepauk.
Yeah, Monty, coming to you just quickly on Chennai Super Kings. Who's that player who's standing out for them according to you this season?
Well, I think, you know, for me, it has to be Moeen Ali. You know, I think Moeen Ali, you know, has embraced that number 3 position, and you know, it's a nice position for him, because he knows if they lose a wicket, there's still he's still in the power play. He can hit over the infield, hit a few boundaries. And he's got that license. He hasn't got the pressure because he knows the batting is strong, and they're just expecting him to just to get 20 or 30 really. And then if he kicks on from that, it's just bonus, and I think that's a nice role for him. It doesn't put too much pressure. And bowling wise, I think Dhoni always brings him on when the team is in a good position. They've got a few wickets, they're under pressure, get a couple of overs in from Moeen Ali, nice and tight, picks up a couple of wickets. I'll give him a few more. If not, I'm just looking to get some tight overs in when the opposition's under pressure. So I think that role works really well for Moeen Ali. And there's not, you're not expecting him to, let's say, win the game, but you're expecting him just to do his role with the bat and the ball. And I think that's, again, Dhoni trying to get the best out of different individuals. While when he plays for England, I think there's a more demand on him. He needs to, bowl really well, do bat and all that. But I think this role, again, it's the genius of MS Dhoni, where Nakul said he's a great captain, but any runs he'll get this year as a bonus. Let's hope that bonus starts happening more often, where then if next week or in a couple of weeks' time, Nakul says, actually, we're expecting Dhoni to hit 4s and 6s, and which he has been doing.
Yeah, and lastly, on Chennai Super Kings, this week they have 2 games coming up. That's Sunrisers Hyderabad and Mumbai Indians, both in Delhi. Are we expecting, Nakul, are you expecting them to stay top of the table come next week when we sit here and talk about the IPL again?
Making IPL predictions is a notoriously difficult thing to do. It should be bear in mind, they're top on net run rate. There are 3 teams, so it's them, Delhi, and RCB top on and level on points. The Sunrisers look a weird and oddly constructed team. Their overseas balance is off. Delhi probably suits them a little bit better than some of the pitches they've been playing on, because they're a little bit slower, and it brings some of their bowlers into the game, and the emphasis isn't so much on power hitting. But I would expect Chennai to win that game. The Mumbai game is going to be a fascinating one. Mumbai haven't adapted as well to the slower pitches as some, and they're playing on a slowish pitch. I'll be watching very closely to see how these Delhi pitches perform. They are slow, but they haven't had nearly as much use as the Chennai pitches have, which have been going almost constantly on sort of 6 or 7 wickets since September. But I think 2 from 2 is certainly not out of the question for Chennai. I mean, at this point, I'd probably say they beat the Sunrisers and lose to Mumbai. But as I say, those margins are very, very fine.
Yeah, and now finally moving on from Chennai Super Kings to the third point of discussion that we have is players pulling out of the IPL. Some of them have pulled out due to COVID. Some of them have pulled out due to bubble fatigue. The most big name player to have pulled out recently is R. Ashwin from India. He's cited that he wants to protect his family during COVID time, so he's just gone back home. What are you guys' thoughts? And do you reckon the IPL will be called off at some point, or are you expecting it to stay on?
No, look, I don't expect the IPL to be called off. I think they've done really well managing, the whole teams and the venues. I think players are entitled, because of the situation that's happening in India. India, I think, unfortunately, wasn't prepared for the variant, the Indian variant, for this COVID-19. And there's going to be parts of India which, unfortunately, there is a lack of supply of oxygen at the moment. And there's probably concerns with relatives, families, extended, friends and your circle around you. So Ashwin, unfortunately, maybe some of his extended family members have had COVID, and he feels like he needs to be there for them to support them, during this tough time. And I think players should be entitled to go there and support their families. And it's a very well professional and structured. The IPL, it has always been like that. So we won't expect the IPL to get called off.
Yeah, Nakul, on that, you just said earlier when we were talking about this that Nathan Coulter-Nile said that IPL bubble is probably one of the safest places in India at the moment. And so do you reckon that's one of the reasons the IPL will carry on, is because that bubble is so strong in terms of not being able to detect COVID quickly on players and isolating them very quickly?
The bubble's worked. There's absolutely no doubt that the IPL bubble has worked. I think we've had 5 players test positive, only one of whom was seriously symptomatic, and he's now Akshar Patel, who was isolated in a special facility, recovered, and is back well and back to the cricketing consideration is minor in a sense, but he's back to full fighting fitness and performed really well yesterday. And we've had players being asymptomatic and caught quickly and isolated. We've had Kiran Morde, one of the coaching staff, similar, and the Wankhede ground staff. So it's been a handful of players. There have not been cases within the bubble. They're getting tested 3 times a day. And that includes the support staff, that includes all the hotel staff, that includes the ground staff. The logistics around their travel days are very tight and very secure. They've got floors of the hotels to themselves. The bubble is working. When we saw the Pakistan Super League be suspended, it was because there were cases in the bubble. When we saw the Premier League in English football suspended last year at the start of the COVID pandemic hitting Europe, it was because players and managers were getting COVID within the team environments. So from that point of view, I don't think the IPL will be suspended. From a sort of, is this in bad taste to have this going on while the COVID crisis is raging in India? That's a more difficult one to argue, and I can understand why people are uncomfortable with the optics. But this is also a point of light and a point of joy and a point of something that isn't despair and horror and stress of seeing. Anyone with any kind of social media links to India is just seeing their timeline fill up at the moment with just desperate people almost begging for their lives on social media, which is incredibly hard to watch and must be, luck. I've checked in, my family are all safe in India as of now, but I've definitely, if I don't know people, I know people who are, and Monty will be the same, and you'll be the same as well, Viraj. And the Indian players will have a similar point. I saw Ricky Ponting saying that the overseas players really need to step up and support the Indian players while all of this is happening. As for the specific cases, Ashwin has pulled out to be with his family, and also I think he said that he wants to do something concrete to support the relief effort. We've seen Andrew Tai pull out from Rajasthan, as I say, because he's worried about Western Australia, where he lives, locking down, and basically he means he won't be able to get back home. He got married just before the tournament started. Adam Zampa got married just before the tournament started. He's pulled out for similar reasons. Kane Richardson has like a 7-month-old child, I think, and he's pulled out for that reason. A combination of being with family and alleviating the stress of their families and making sure they can get back home, because Australia's been very tight on locking things down and limiting travel from India and limiting even Australian residents coming home. So there are specific circumstances behind all of their pulling out. But I think Nathan Coulson is probably right. Being within that bubble with all the support and all the logistical help is no question the safest place in India to be right now. As I said, that is a slightly uncomfortable thing to reckon with. Being in this sort of gilded, protected bubble when everything else is going on, but I don't particularly see how the IPL stopping will actually help the situation.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat as you. I don't see how IPL stopping is going to help the situation, because I remember reading a study about IPL 2020 when COVID was still quite high in India, that when the IPL began, COVID numbers started to drop because more and more people started staying home to watch the IPL. And I think that's one of the reasons they've still managed to keep the IPL going, because it brings joy to so many people watching. It's just like 3.5 hours they can switch off and watch some cricket and not think about it. So if it helps a little, it helps, doesn't it? So why not?
But yeah, and the IPL, I think, could be doing a lot more than it is. I mean, we've seen some individual players talking about it, and we've seen players doing sort of public health announcements like stay masked and so forth. But the IPL has a lot of monetary power, and some of that could be put to good use. You can certainly question the specifics of the fund that Pat Cummins donated to, and whether that was the right place for that money to go. But I think the IPL can continue and do a lot more good by continuing and helping out materially with the effort rather than stopping.
Yeah, I think, you've covered that pretty well. And now we'll move on to the next segment, which is SSE's top performers of the week. And we'll start with someone you already touched upon, Nakul, Ravindra Jadeja. why don't you kick us off and tell us why he's so magnificent, beautiful? And I saw a post from Deepak Chahar. This is what a 3D player looks like, and there's a picture of Ravindra Jadeja. So thoughts?
Yeah, take that, Ambati Raidu, or Vijay Shankar, or whoever was in charge of the Indian selection at the time. As I said, one of the great all-time T20 performances. There was an eliminator a few years ago where Rashid Khan got 3 wickets and scored about 30 off 13 balls and took a catch and a run out.
That was against KKR. Do not remind me.
This and there was a game where Andre Russell scored a 40-ball 100 and took a hat trick in the same game in the CPL. This is right up there with those performances. He completely changed the tenor of their game because RCB had done pretty well through the middle and latter stages of that innings with the ball after Chennai had won the toss, and it looked as though I was on. I can't remember if I was actually on ball-by-ball commentary at the time, but I was certainly covering the game for Guerrilla Cricket and was thinking, right, a good over here gets them to 170, which is a decent score, possibly not par. RCB are in really good form, and then Harshal Patel, leading wicket taker in the tournament, really good death bowler, bowling in the form of his life, and Jadeja just took to him. And after that, after the no ball got hit for 6 and then the free hit, Harshal just kind of collapsed, as happens when a guy's hitting the ball that well. And Jadeja's clarity of thought and his and the sort of the freedom with which he was swinging, and there was and the sort of from a technical point, keeping that freedom of swing and that acceleration through the line of the ball was just magnificent to watch. And he completely took that game and changed the tenor of it. And then comes on a really important time after RCB had started really well. Devdutt Paddikal again batting brilliantly after his 100 of the other day, and then comes on and makes it look like a completely different game. Was turning the ball at pace. I mean, the ball he got Maxwell again. He got Maxwell again. Got De Villiers with another beauty, very similar to the ball he got Butler with, turning sharply from Monty, I'm sure, can talk about this. That's the dream for a left arm finger spinner, to be able to turn the ball that much at pace. And then showed again. I don't know why people insist on taking quick singles to Ravindra Jadeja. It was almost as though they didn't realize it was him, but just brilliant again in the field. And it was an absolutely stunning performance.
Yeah, Monty, in terms of a spin perspective on Ravindra Jadeja, what's he done? Like, he's completely transformed his bowling in the last 5 to 6 years. Because he used to be a good player, but he's just taken his bowling and batting to the next level. So what's he done right?
Well, I think with any cricketer, once you had a bit of a break, it's nice to be back playing again, and he's refreshed. He's a great fielder, and his batting again. If they took that catch, would he perform the same way? Cricket's fine margins. If they took that catch, we probably wouldn't have seen the big sixes and all that. And then, it's confidence thing, isn't it? He's got a couple of run outs. He's bowling well. Everything's just coming together. But just imagine if you took that catch. If the RCB players took that catch, we probably wouldn't have seen a great performance. So sometimes, we can, let's say, overemphasize, his performances. It's like, we know he's a great cricketer and he's a great player. But I am a great believer that it's MS Dhoni. He was batting with MS Dhoni at the time. MS Dhoni didn't even go for the big sixes and the fours because he knew that at this given time, the momentum is with Ravindra Jadeja. He got the best out of him. He said, you just keep going, mate. The flow, you're flowing and you're doing great. I'm not going to, get in the way and compete with you. Now, that's what you call player management. That's what you call at the right time knowing, how to get the best out of individuals. And that's why MS Dhoni is the greatest captain, I think, in T20 cricket. I said in India, but I think this group of individuals. And he's getting the best out of Ravindra Jadeja, Sam Curran, we've seen Moeen Ali. He could easily play at number 3 for England. And I think we seem to forget that the guy who is behind Ravindra Jadeja is actually MS Dhoni.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned that because Ravindra Jadeja, I saw an IPL video he did with Imran Tahir, and both of them spoke about how MS Dhoni talks to them and just tells them to be free and not worry about the consequences if they fail. And he's basically, MS Dhoni told Ravindra Jadeja was running the twos and was really tired, and MS Dhoni went, if you're tired, just go hit sixes. It's the last over. What have you got to lose?
Have you done that in a match?
I can't do it. I'm not good enough.
No, but
I
club
mean,
cricket, of course. You must have done it at club cricket for your Kent team. I
Yeah,
feel tired today, so I was going to hit sixes and
I
fours.
can't imagine Tunbridge Wells ever gets to 38 degrees in the shade.
No, but
That,
it's a
that,
mood thing today. Viraj, what do you feel like today, mate? I just want to hit sixes and fours. Just go for it then.
imagine. Yeah, might do it.
you are right to point out the catch. It was Dan Christian, an incredibly experienced cricketer, would catch that 9.5 times out of 10, and it just went straight through his hands. And those little turning points are important, obviously. But talk about taking advantage of it from Jadeja's point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a magnificent performance, but we also have to talk about another magnificent performance during the week, and that is Devdutt Paddikal's 100. That to be the main player when you're batting with Virat Kohli, he was also got a really good 50, 70 not odd not out. To do that and take the game away from the opposition the way he did, that takes some special doing. And what do you make of Devdutt Paddikal's inning, Monty?
Well, firstly, I've never opened the batting in a T20 match, and secondly, I don't really know how he seems to hit those sixes and fours with such flow. I think from a bowling perspective, all I can say is that it's a talent that I think, potentially he'll probably, I think he can play Test cricket the way his technique is set up. But T20 could be the format that could help him, to get into the India team and, to get 100, when Virat Kohli is watching you from the other end, that is going to be like, I think at some point very soon, we'll probably see him play for India. But it's great to see, that's part of the IPL is you need the younger, especially the young 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds to come through the system and challenge, for selection. And that's what we hope to see, even in the NatWest Blast of the 100 this year. We want to see the young English players. We want to see more of the Tom Bantons coming through, Ben Duckett's, stuff like that. So part of the league, it's great to see young players outshining the experience.
Yeah, and that would be great to watch, especially with the 100. I believe KKR CEO has said that they're interested in get investing in the IPL, and there's talk that from the 2022 season, India under 23 players who are not part of the national setup will be allowed to play in the 100. So we'll see how that works out. I'm sure that will be a great experience for both Indian as well as English cricketers to play alongside each other. But yeah, and thing about Devdutt Paddikal, Nakul, I wanted to ask you is the fact that he's a left-hander. Does that work in his favor in terms of his India opportunity in the future? Because the young batsmen coming through, Prithvi Shaw, we've heard so much about Yashasvi Jaiswal is left-handed, but players like Prithvi Shaw and Shubman Gill, who are supposed to be the next two big openers for India, does it help Paddikal the fact that he's left-handed?
Maybe a little. I think there's a little bit too much made of the right hand, left hand thing. I mean, I was commentating that game alongside Rohi Bopara. I've never seen a professional cricketer be quite so much, not in awe, but sort of almost purring on commentary about how cleanly Paddikal was able to hit the ball. I think what it did help with is it took away a few of the Rajasthan Royals bowling options. They didn't adapt to the angle, so they were bowling across him and allowing Paddikal to. He has this very free, easy swing of the bat with that big backlift, sort of like, a little bit like Yuvraj Singh. That everything's working. It just looks so simple and so fluent. But he was able to use that left-hander's angle and go with it and go over cover, over point, using his wrists to guide the ball over point and guide the ball through third man and basically just make a mockery of wherever Rajasthan put the field. He hit it where someone wasn't, and then his power down the ground and over the onside as well with those sort of pull shots. He's a wonderful player, Devdutt Paddikal, and you can understand why everybody in India has been so excited about him for the last couple of years. Amazing to think that in 2018 he didn't even make India's under-19 World Cup squad. Such was the depth. I think in fact he lost out to Shubman Gill and a few others as well, and Jaiswal, I think, in that tournament. Incidentally, I'm glad to see Yashasvi Jaiswal getting a game now for Rajasthan. I think he's a special talent with a great story. But yeah, Paddikal was for periods of that game and even periods of the Chennai game. It looked like you weren't sure where to bowl to him because he had an answer for everything, and he was under pressure coming into that game. In the Sunday game previously, he'd put Glenn Maxwell under a lot of pressure with his inability to time the ball, but he something clicked, some caught of freedom. Obviously, he has just come out of a COVID bubble, so maybe that was, or COVID isolation, so maybe it just took a couple of games for that rust to wear off. But he's got everything. Potentially, Devdutt Paddikal. We've mentioned Gill and Prithvi Shaw. Mayank Agarwal's still not. Is a bit older than those guys, but is still knocking around, and so there's a lot of competition for spaces at the top of the order, and I think it'll take a couple of good seasons and a couple of good India A seasons and tours for Paddikal to seriously challenge for India selection. But he's got the game. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and we hope to see more from Devdutt Paddikal throughout this IPL. A player who did make the 2018 Under-19 World Cup squad was Shiva Mavi, and he came in for Kamlesh Nagarkoti for the Rajasthan Royals game. And the reason we've got him on this list is because he managed to make a match out of nothing for KKR. He came in, bowled 4 overs, took a wicket for 19 runs, and extended the inevitable. We can say that because KKR was no way going to win that game. But yeah, just a quick word on Shiva Mavi before we wrap up. What did y'all make of his performance, and were y'all impressed for someone to just come in for the first game of the season and do that well?
Oh, great! Yeah, KKR has been brilliant. They've been absolutely brilliant, producing individual performances and losing most of the games. That is the problem with KKR, and this is the trouble. You got to get 11 players to perform. You can't have individuals just come in and think that they've done well. Mavi's been well invested by KKR. He had a few injuries a couple of years back, and they invested in this guy. It's just, yet again, what frustrates me is that there's individuals performing really well. Because Owen Morgan is, we follow him because we're from England, just thinking they're not connecting as a team, and it's very frustrating to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of very good performances when the game is already doomed for KKR. I mean, we saw it with Russell and Cummins the game before that. Well, Mavi, you can't really criticize Shiva Mavi in his performance. In that circumstance, he's had those injuries after the Under-19 World Cup where he and Nagarkoti were brilliant for India Under-19. And I like Shiva Mavi. I like his attitude. I like his commitment to continuing to bowl at high pace, even though he is injured. He's added little bits to his game, as you have to do. You can't just bang it in back of a length all the time and hit top of off like you can in first class cricket. Shiva Mavi has probably been a little bit unlucky in the sense that his injuries came at a time when India were producing a bunch of fast bowlers, or rather, a bunch of guys who are a bit older than him started performing. But Shiva Mavi isn't the problem. They've got the individuals for KKR. So back to the conversation we had at the start of this show. It's the performances kind of setting up the game to allow those guys to perform and to start getting those wins together. But there is huge upside in this KKR team.
Yeah, and I really hope it all comes together in the second half of this IPL that we've got going, because it's sad to see my home team languishing at the bottom. It feels like a long way away from that IPL winning team of 2012 and 14. I tweeted about it, actually. I put up that picture of the IPL 2012 winning team and said, is there a way of knowing you're in the good old days before you leave them? So I really hope we can get back to the top. But thank you both for joining me. And Monty, have a lovely birthday.
Thank you so much, Viraj. I think this show is hopefully keeps growing, and we can, Nicole, it's been brilliant.
Cheers, guys.